when I made the Olympic team for speed skating, I mean, there should have been a minimum age, and I should not have made it. I'm just going to say that straight up. It sounds really cool, looks good in the bio, that I made it. I was in 9th grade. I'd never been to Canada. I hadn't been out of the country.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Odd Tandem. Today, we have a very special episode. If you don't know her already, I'll give you a couple hints. She is Olympic champion from Los Angeles in 1984. She has a son that raced and won stages in many, many races for many, many years. Her daughter-in-law is the reigning Tour de France champion, and her husband was an absolute legend and personal hero of mine. Jens, it was a special episode with Connie Carpenter-Phinney, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
It was. She is so cheerful, so positive, so nice, and so full of wisdom as well. It was absolutely great and fantastic. An honor to talk to her. And folks, we actually do listen to you, to your comments. So we had a request. We should bring in an older retired cyclist, a female cyclist, to give tips about training at age of 50 plus. And we did outdo ourselves with bringing in an Olympic champion to tell you about how to use an e-bike.
Yeah, I tell you, this was special in so many ways. I hope everyone listens to the names that she has such a history and has been such a legend. And, with the Olympics coming back to Los Angeles in 2028, I hope they do some sort of memorial honoring her, because she started it for a lot of women, and actually for me as well, winning in the Los Angeles in 1984. So sit back and relax and listen to our great conversation with Connie Carpenter-Phinney. Welcome, Connie Carpenter-Phinney, to the Odd Tandem.
Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, well, this is going to be fun because we go back a long time, but I understand that you recently made a little hop across the pond, if you can say that. Where are you coming to us from at the moment?
Well, I'm from our second home in Girona. After the pandemic, when we realized we weren't seeing enough of Taylor and Kasia, Taylor found us an apartment here. So we have a year-round apartment that we keep, so we can have our bikes, our beds, our, everything we want. And we've been coming now twice a year for ever since we could, for 2+ months at a time. So it really feels like home now.
That is so cool. But before we go deeper into that, how much time you spent there, we have the tradition of having 4 quick-fire questions.
Okay.
So, you're ready to go. Will the 28 Olympics in LA be as good as the 1984 Olympics?
The Olympics have changed. I think 1980, do I have to give a quick answer? 1984 was a huge corporate success, but it was coming off a lot of negative stuff. The U.S. team had boycotted the previous Olympics. So it was different. And this time, we're going to come in full swashbuckling, I think. I think it'll be awesome. But it's a much bigger deal now, the Olympics, now than then. So did I answer that? I'm not sure.
Yep, absolutely. And you're the guest, you're the king or the queen in this case. You say whatever you want, and it's always right. So was the 84 Olympic race your best race ever in your career, or it just happened to be the most important one, or was it the day where you are the smartest, the strongest, the best you ever been?
Ooh, you set me up on that one. I think one of the best races I ever, the strongest I ever was racing in a men's race in Colorado at the Tour of the Moon. Bobby, you'll appreciate that. Trying to keep up with the guys and dropping a lot of the guys. I think Alexi Graywell won that one that day. So, I was in good company. I remember my men's races more than my women's races. But the 84 games had so much pressure, Jens, that wasn't my best race. I had to be kind of conservative. I couldn't take that many chances because I knew I could win, and I just had to be smart and do it right. And then at the end of the day, I did. I was very lucky to
And
be
you
on
were
the
good
winning
as
side.
well. Come on, don't sell
Yeah,
yourself short. You were good as well.
I was great that day, Jens. I'll say that. Yeah.
So, what is harder, becoming an Olympic champion or being a parent?
Oh, being a parent.
Yes, right?
So
I know Bobby and me,
so
we would agree to that. Yes,
yes.
absolutely.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I just can't. Yes, we all in agreement on that. Yes, yes. I mean, you know what? I think being an elite athlete, when we stop, we don't realize what we had until we stopped, and then we were like, oh, I got to be so selfish, you know. And the world just centered around me, and that was pretty cool. But I actually got really tired of it. You guys had way longer careers than I had because you could be pro. I couldn't be pro. I was an amateur. But anyway, go ahead. What's my last one?
Who is Sam the Eagle? Do you still remember him?
Who?
Sam the Eagle, or Eagle Sam.
Oh, Sam the Eagle, the ski jumper?
No, that's Eddie the Eagle. Sam the
Oh,
Eagle.
Eddie the Eagle.
Eddie
Oh,
the
Sam
Eagle.
the
Yes.
Eagle was our mascot.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
mascot. Okay.
Absolutely. The other one's a ski jumper. I remember him as
Yes,
well. Eddie
yes,
the
the
Eagle, of
ski
course.
jumper.
Yes.
Sam the Eagle, yes, the
Yeah.
mascot. Yes, yes. Okay.
Fantastic.
Wow. Woo.
So obviously you can see where we're going here, an Olympic theme, but you don't just win the Olympics on that day. Can you tell us what your preparation was like, both physical and mental prior to that? Because, I mean, like you said, there was a lot of pressure going on your shoulders going into those games.
Well, yeah, let me set the stage for what it was like to be a female cyclist in 1984 or even in 1983, right? So we had very few solid races outside of this country. And in the late 70s and early 80s, I actually self-funded to go race in Holland because that was always and still is where all the best, female cyclists seem to sprout from. And I had been a speed skater before that, so it was natural for me to go to Holland. I could get host housing. I could race in a lot of races. I could really race with my competition on their home turf. But it was when, Michael Eisner, when he was running the Redzinger, which then became the Coors Classic, he wanted us, and it was a great privilege to be able to race against the Europeans on American soil and bring them here for a really solid stage race that, again, ran right next to the men's race with the huge crowds. And so the highlight of the whole season was always the Coors Classic. And everything else paled in comparison. So in 1984, I made probably the biggest risk I took was that I didn't race in women's races for a 6-week period. I only raced with the men. And I could do that. So there weren't big teams at the time. I could enter a lot of, men's criteriums, circuit races, and even road races. I had to discipline myself in some of those races to drop out with 25 miles to go, like in a 100-mile race, because I didn't want to get slow. And our races were tops 50 miles at the time. And that was considered a good distance because when I started racing, some of the races I would travel to were 5 and 10 miles.
What?
In duration. And so I would race in the women's race at 8:00 in the morning, and then I would race in the men's race at 2 in the afternoon. And that's how I got fit. That's how I got better than everyone else, is because I raced more. I loved racing. What I didn't get in speed skating was all this racing. And I loved to race. And we had club races 2 days a week. I raced in track races 2 days a week. I never had to train in the early years. I just raced all the time. And I loved racing. It was so much fun.
So you picked men's races to get stronger, to give yourself a tougher challenge, to force your body to become stronger, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that happen when you're a lead female racer, especially at that time, is I never had the opportunity to sit back in the pack. I was always on the front, off the front. I didn't know what was happening in the back. I didn't know I didn't know how easy it was to sit in. Our races were too short to sit in. So in the men's races, I could sit in and realize and make big attacks. I went on the attack in men's races back then, even in criteriums. I tried to win men's criteriums. I mean, the best place I ever got was a 4th. And I worked hard for that one. But a lot of times the guys would chase me, and I always heard people on the side like, chase the woman. Keep up with the woman. But I knew it would be risky because it could be dangerous, right? And actually it was dangerous that spring of 1984 because I had some guys. I was racing in an Olympic trials qualifier in California, and I got dropped from the lead group, but I was in a really fast chasing group, and we had a tailwind, and a couple guys went down in front of me, and I just T-boned them, and I went up in the air and landed on the back of my head, and I actually nicked an artery and there was blood everywhere. and I actually wanted to ride in right to the finish. No. But I think I might have talked my way to riding back. And then we had to go to the ER and get some stitches. And even then I was like, are you sure? Boom, boom. But anyway, I was tough back then. I don't even know how I did that stuff, but that was the hardest part of it. And then I took a week off, took a week kind of easy, and then had to get a bunch of stitches. And when I asked the doctor, actually, do you think I cracked my skull? Should we do an X-ray? She said, well, I can feel in there, and nothing's broken.
Whoa.
What? Anyway, I don't know if I had the best care. But anyway, so then we flew across country and raced in, the Athens criterium. I don't know, Bobby, if you ever raced in that.
Yep.
But that's a nighttime criterium at warp speed. And I would hang on to that thing and what I would say was what I learned to do in men's races was I would say I would just close my eyes and go with the speed. Of course, I wasn't closing my eyes, but what I did was I shut my fear off, and I was like, if they can go that fast through the turn, I can go that fast through the turn. And that's what I had to do. And that's how I learned to race, and all this time, Davis and I were already married. We married in October of 1983. And so he was in Europe racing. He had to be in Europe racing with Eddie B., our national coach. Oh, we're going to get the thumbs up.
Yeah.
With Eddie B. and the national team. And he was doing really well. But without cell phones and with only pay phones and me traveling and him not having my phone number, we probably talked to each other, if we were lucky, once a week, but usually like every couple of weeks. And that was hard. That was the hardest part, actually, was being apart for that long, because we were apart for 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah, we mentioned it on a prior podcast before cell phones that Jens and I would write a letter and then fax it to our partners, our girlfriends, and now wives. And he asked it to Corinne Rivera, who was like obviously much younger than us, and I just had to jibe him a little bit and say, hey, listen, she's not nearly as old as us, but it's good to hear that you kind of had to suffer through that like we did as well.
Oh, for sure. And we did the fax too. Actually, we had some fax messages back and forth, and I saved a lot of those, because they were kind of cute. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Me too. Me too. I saved half a booklet of fax messages between my wife and me, of course.
Yeah. And that was it. And, in order to get a phone call, well, you probably remember you had to go line up downstairs. You couldn't call from your room at this was better than when I was speed skating. That was even worse. That was in the early 70s, and I would be in Norway, and I was desperately alone. I was a teenager, and I couldn't call my parents, and it was not a good setup for me. It was like really, you see the painting, the Edvard Munch with the guy screaming on the bridge? That was me half the time.
Oh my God.
Not good. But now it's almost too much, right? Because the relationships that Davis has with his teammates is because they didn't have phones. They were all together,
Ooh, good point.
And so the relationships, also people didn't jump teams so often. But if you guys, when you room together, because I know you room together, that's how you became good friends, right? And when you room together, if you were the whole time just on your phone, which is like most kids today, And I use kids loosely, anybody under 30. And, they're just, on their phones, and they're not establishing this relationship or this dependency on your friends for entertainment, play cards, do fun stuff together. I don't know. It's really different.
Talk to each other. Whoa, that's a new thing. But
Yeah.
but Connie, I've always been curious about this because so many people responsible for the growth of USA cycling back in the 70s and 80s came from the Wisconsin area through ice skating. What
Right.
was it like being part of that community where you guys ice skated during the winter and then rode bikes together during the summer?
Look, I wouldn't be anywhere without Sheila Young Akowitz, and one of the things I would say, if I could meet women today, the young people, I would want them to understand that they're standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before them, right? And there's no shortage of my acknowledgement of that. I've been working on a memoir for 10 years, and I can't say enough about the people that came before me because they were so tough and they set such a high bar, and they did it for love. I don't believe you can do this sport if you don't love it. You have to love it. And Sheila was a track sprinter, and she won gold, silver, and bronze. She was my roommate when I was 14 at my first Olympics. She was Sheila Young then. And then and she was already racing bikes, but I wasn't interested at that time. But by the time I was about 17, 18, I started showing up and riding more with her because she was racing in the summer, and she was world champion on the track for the sprints. And the other thing is women only had 3 events at the World Championships. We had the road race, track sprinting, and pursuiting. That was it. And she was world sprint champion, and you never saw a more daring sprinter in your life. I don't care, men or women. She was amazing. And so she did that in the summer, and then in the winter came back and was winning all these world championships, and she won gold, silver, and bronze in the 76 Olympics. And she won the world championships that year in sprinting. So, she didn't get to compete in the Olympics in cycling. And that's, I acknowledge her. We're still really good friends, and really acknowledge like what she did to bring me into the sport and, take me under her wing along with a few others. But Eric Heiden too, he followed me. Eric Heiden is like 2 years younger than I am. He said when I made the Olympic team at 14, he was angry. I said, how could you be angry? You were 12. He said, well, I wanted to make the team too. I said, you didn't even try out. But that was this thing, we were all really competitive, and, we did a lot of goofing around together and had a lot of fun. And then he saw some of us riding bikes, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to try that, so yeah, it was a great area to come out of. The clubs were big, but we could race all the time. So I raced, as I said, I raced in club races. I raced on the track in Kenosha and in Northbrook. And these are just tiny little tracks, but they were like big parties, every I think it was Tuesday and Friday night or something. And then I'd go to some races on the weekend all over the Midwest. So there was no shortage of opportunities.
So it was your roommate, the ice skater, a woman, Sheila. She inspired you to try cycling, or where and how did you transition from ice skating to cycling?
Well, interestingly, when I made the Olympic team for speed skating, I mean, there should have been a minimum age, and I should not have made it. I'm just going to say that straight up. It sounds really cool, looks good in the bio, that I made I was in 9th grade. I'd never been to Canada. I hadn't been out of the country. I needed to, well, that's actually not true. I actually took a family vacation once, but I'm going to say that I'd never competed out of the country. So I my parents were powerless to hold me back. And I felt the same way with Taylor. When Taylor started to take off and I wanted to hold him back, how do you do that with your kid? It's really hard. And so they just, people would ask my mother, how do you get her to train? And she would say, how do I get her to stop? I mean, it's like, so I trained a lot, but I never got better. And so I was seeing what Sheila was doing, and I thought, oh, I might try that. And so I just started to go, she just included me. Like, what do you want to do, Carp? And one thing that happened was she took me up to the 76 Summer Olympics with her. I went with her just to do some training, and she was at the track in Allentown, Pennsylvania, Trexlertown. And it's not that far to Montreal. Her then husband, Jim Okowitz, was racing. And so we went up to Montreal, and I got to go in the infield and watch all the events because she said she needed a pass for herself and her friend. And the guy was like, I give you a pass, but not her. And I was like, and she was like, well, nope, you're giving us both a pass. So, she brought me in, and that inspired me so much. And the fact that there were no women racing really bothered me. There were no women racing, but I did get excited about watching the men, and I could see myself doing it, and in that moment I was like, I'm going to try this. So that's what I tried first, was mostly pursuing. And then I thought, well, I'll try the road race too. And I just won the road race the first time I tried at our nationals. They said, do you want to come to the world championships? And I was like, sure, why not? I don't know. Do I? I mean, I was really green, but it was, but that's how I learned, is just by saying yes, and I had another mentor at the time too, who was an older woman who was very successful. And I beat her at the nationals and in both the pursuit and the road race by just a little bit. And she took me under her wing, invited me to her house, taught me how to train, and took me to all these races, and she was always racing in the men's races. So without her, and her name is Miji Riak, I wouldn't have been anywhere. I would have been, like, yeah, this might be fun, but I don't know what I'm doing. And so it really takes somebody to bring you along, I think, sometime, especially for the women in that era.
Wow. So many things that you just said just reminds me of when we met. We met back in 1986 in Copper Mountain at the first ever Connie Carpenter-Phinney training camp. And talk about acknowledging people that inspired you, that helped you, that paved the road for you. You and Davis, at a very awkward time in my teenage career, really showed me something that I didn't know was possible. And I've had these mementos ever since. And I'm not sure if you can see them, but I'm going to hold it up. This is a picture of us during the first ever Connie Carpenter-Phinney training camp on top of Loveland Pass. And you can pick out, I think you can see everything. Where am I, Jens? Am I right down here?
Yes, in the middle, the lower line in the middle, with the cap up like this. 2 places behind you, beside you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, and that's the Rocky Mountain News cap that Davis gave me, because during this camp, he was actually racing the Rocky Mountain News Classic at the same time as doing this camp. I don't know how he did it, but this is probably it's my oldest memento. The last day of camp, my mom or dad, I forget which one, came to pick me up, and I had a calendar from the Coors Classic, and I ripped out the page with Davis on it, and this is the calendar. Hopefully you can see that. That's Davis, the cash register Phinney winning.
To Bobby.
You signed it to Bobby, but this is the favorite part. I'm going to just read it.
Yeah, I can't see it, so tell me.
So he said to Bobby, see you soon as a star in the Coors Classic, Davis.
Oh.
And that...
He was right.
Well, I never got to race the Coors Classic, but I did get to do the Tour de Trump, the Tour de Pont, and obviously the Tour de France. But I mean...
You got to be a star, that's the point.
But I wouldn't have if I didn't go to that camp, because it was something that you guys opened my eyes to so many things, and seeing Davis win the Rocky Mountain News Classic and then come and ride with us like, hey, I know that guy. He gave me the little casquette. He signed my calendar here, and you were such a big part of that. You even, we won't talk about this, but you had to take me to the hospital after I crashed and gashed my eye out above my eye. But what, a lot of people do camps now, but what was y'all's motivation to do that camp, to start the Davis Phinney Connie Carpenter camp back in 1986?
Yeah, well, the whole motivation was that it took us so long and so many different routes to improve in cycling, and there were so little other opportunities or ways to do that. So the original basis was to help juniors like yourself. We ended up, probably half the camp would have been juniors, and then the other half were mostly like master's age racers, right? Like it's not like we got the in between, and very few women actually, but but it was because we wanted to give back. We knew we had something to offer, and we didn't want people to take as much time as we took. There were so few coaches out there. Now there's a lot of coaches you can hire, but back then, no. It was just, if you were lucky enough to be in a good club, you might have had good direction, but otherwise not. And so we really focused on a couple of things, and it developed over years. So, by the way, I just also have to say, you were so cute when you came to camp. You had your little Oakleys on, and you looked at Davis like you were like a puppy dog.
Oh, yes.
And it was really cute. But you were kind of serious. So maybe we got you a little less serious, because, that's what happens to us when we're teenagers, right? We take it like it's so serious. It's everything, right? And I think that's a big part. That was a big mistake for me for speed skating. I was way too serious. But anyway, the point is, you want so badly to be better, right? And that's a fun group to work with. Everybody that came to our camps always learned a lot. And we really focused on bike fit, because most people were fit really terribly on their bikes. They would just buy a bike that was too big or too small, and they didn't realize they could make adjustments and be more comfortable and safer. And then teaching people to corner. So we did all the cornering clinics in a parking lot around cones to get people comfortable and understand how their bike worked, how their brakes work, because they never really were thinking about it, how to stand up properly on the bike even. There's a lot of basics that if you don't ride with someone who's really good and smooth, you don't learn, And when I was riding with Miji Riak, she used to like tap me if my form looked bad on the bike. Stop that. But, so I really valued that. And then I had studied exercise science undergraduate and then got a master's degree while I was pregnant with Taylor, actually. So I got a master's degree in exercise science after you had come to camp. And it was mainly, again, just so I could give the information from a scientific basis as well as an experiential basis. So, our motivation was just because we love cycling and we wanted people to enjoy it more and to get better at it.
Do you think we need more camps like that in these days, looking at the Olympics coming up in the US? Or is there enough camps for young kids, for juniors to get better? Or you think we need to improve the recruitment of young talent?
Well, no, the biggest concern I have right now is the number of juniors going right to the Pro Tour. And this is the latest. I mean, I think that you see this. Taylor, the best thing he did was he did 2 years of, the Espoir category, the U23 with Axel as the leader of his team, and raced in the Espoir Roubaix and won those. So he learned how to win against a much more competitive field. As a junior, to your point of crashing, Bobby, I think that the point of juniors is they crash a lot, But as you get to be a Espoir, you're more, under 23, you're more capable. And you're racing with a highly competitive group, and especially when you come to Europe. And so he learned so much in those couple of years. And even then he went pro a little too soon, I think, which was at age 20. But now these guys are going over right away because the under 23 races are going away. The women have it worse because now, there weren't historically very many juniors. Now there's more. But the U23 level never developed. So there were never those races. There aren't a lot of lesser races. There are some like 2.2 races. And we have some U.S. women here in Spain right now that aren't on international teams that are trying to get into races. And then their races get canceled or they can't get in. And it's really hard. It's really hard to get those training level races for young women. And I think, so to answer your question, Jens, I think it's a combination of needing more camps. When I was our national junior coach for a number of years, and we had a lot of camps and did a lot of skills and drills with those kids because they had to race with seniors even then, as juniors if they wanted competition. But I don't think we're doing a very good job of development in cycling. I think we're pushing them too hard, too fast. And I think the sport is chewing up a lot of good talent, and you won't see them again. They'll be gone.
That seems to be an overwhelming opinion of the older generation. But when you talk to the young kids, they have so much more knowledge. They have so much more tracking apps and great coaching, great teams that are following them. And I'm sure we're gonna Mr. Taylor is gonna come up again. But I wanted to ask you a little question about when I grew up in cycling. It seemed to me, as a young athlete with your guys' pictures on my wall, that men's and women's cycling, it was the same. It was, on par with men's cycling. Races like the Course Classic, photos that I had of the Tour de France with the men's winner and the women's winner on the same podium. That is encapsulated in my mind.
Yeah, it's iconic.
The Course Classic, that was in my backyard. The Tour de France, I believe they had the women's Tour de France from 84 to 89, and you retired or you didn't do the Tour de France. But now we just have this massive excitement around women's cycling. But from 1989-ish to the pandemic 2020-ish, what happened to create that void between where women's cycling looked like it was going to where it was, and then luckily we've come out of that now? But what was the reason for creating that void of women's cycling being on par with the men?
Donald Trump.
Okay, you got to explain that a little closer, a little more explanation, please, to us here.
So interestingly, so unfortunately, the Coors Classic ended in 1988. That was a huge blow to women's cycling in America and to development and to sponsors. The 80s were a really, really strong time for corporate sponsorship of cycling and our events. And that died off in the 90s. And I can't tell you exactly why, but things changed. Maybe they went more toward golf and tennis. I'm not sure. But we enjoyed a period of really strong sponsorship in the 80s. When there's a much more complex story about why we had the Tour de Trump, but I will tell you that the Tour de Trump did not include women, and it was a U.S.-based race, and it was a shock to people like me because the Tour de Trump was sort of billed as, even though it was in the East Coast, not in Colorado in the West, was billed as taking the place of what we had in Colorado, but did not include women. And I think promoters saw that and they thought, oh, we don't have to include a women's race? We can spend the money to bring over professional men to race against our men, whatever, make it and professionalize. They professionalized men's racing in America in favor of the development and our women's program. And I think there's a few flaws in that, that the USA Cycling Federation didn't stand up and say, if you're going to run a race at this level, we need women's race, because it was the same with the Tour de Pont. It was the same with when they brought Tour of Georgia and all those other big races. Tour of California was all men for a long time. And I think that we suffered because we didn't have those races. And so it sort of started there, though, with our president.
So if we take a jump into today's time, do you think, or I feel like that women's cycling is in the best state it has ever been right now? We got spectacular races, Women's Tour de France, Women's Giro d'Italia, a Women's Vuelta a España, World Cup races. We got the Paris-Roubaix for women. We got TV coverage, great riders, great talent. They deliver really thrilling racing. It is a fast developing sport. Would you agree that women's cycling in the moment is in the best position it has been in the last 100 years?
Well, let's just say forever. Yes, I would agree with you.
Forever, yes.
Forever. There's never been a time where women's cycling there's more depth, there's more teams, there's more depth, there's more money, there's more TV coverage. So if you would have asked me 10 years ago what I was saying when I could get somebody's ear at UCI, I would have said to them, and I was always saying, you've got to have the women on TV. If we can't see them, we can't support them. And, sometimes I would be watching, because I was a mentor and friend of Evelyn Stevens, who was racing, in the middle 2010 to 16, let's say, at her peak. And sometime I would watch on a live stream, and they would have one camera at the finish line at, one of the biggest races of the year, and you had to just wait till they came through. They could come through a couple times, like at the Tour Binda or whatever. You didn't get to see them. It was terrible. Or it was a camera that was, bouncing along on the road, and you could barely watch it. So we had to be able to see them. And it wasn't until UCI enforced this rule, which was hard for promoters, to put the women at least 30 minutes of coverage, I believe was where they started. That made all the difference in the world, because once we could see women's racing, we realized, oh, this is good, and yes, it's really good. I think it's less formulaic than the men. It's more dramatic, and I think there's maybe more surprises. Witnessed the finish of the Tour de France last year, which happened to favor my daughter-in-law. Phinney finally won the Tour de France. But, it was that you've never seen drama like that in a bike race, right? I don't think. That was like the most dramatic race I've ever seen. And I was in New Zealand at the time. I was watching from 1 a.m. until 5 a.m. And so to see how far it's come, yes. And for me, I've got a ringside seat because of our daughter-in-law, because of Kasia. I know even what she's been through over the last 7 or 8 years, and how much growth has happened. It's staggering. It's fantastic. I think that's going to be more popular than the men's race, guys. Watch out.
Hey, we're all in for that. But yeah, I'm curious. I mean, your family is cycling royalty. Yourself, Davis, your son Taylor, now your daughter-in-law Kasia. I mean, you've informed us and educated us on so much just in the last 30 or so minutes. How have you been able to help Kasia deal with, I guess, her struggles and then the success of being the reigning Tour de France Femme champion?
I think the thing that I bring to the table for Kasia is I love to make pasta, and she likes to eat it. But I think also I understand. There's so much has changed, right? So much has changed. When I raced, we had toe clips. Disc wheels were just becoming a thing. So I don't have near the equipment challenges that they or even choices that not that they have challenges, they have choices. We had challenges. I had one bike,
Yeah.
But I think what I understand is the mental aspect. I understand how it feels to win and to lose and to want more and to be frustrated. And I think that, especially in the earlier days of her career, I could give her a lot of support and advice. Less so now. She knows more than I do now. And all I can do is support her and remind her to take a breath in the races, and do what she knows she needs to do, because now she knows, but I think even 5 years ago, she didn't know herself that well. It was hard to know what to do and how to race. But she's surrounded by some great people now. And I think Taylor is the most calming influence in the world on her, and the most supportive. So I think she's lucky there, and she knows it, but we're lucky to have her in the family. She's one of the most well, you guys have had her on here. I've listened.
Yeah. Big fan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
She's just the real deal, and she makes you want to root for her. And when I was racing, my biggest competitor was Rebecca Twigg, who got second to me at the Olympics. And people either loved me or they loved Rebecca. And that was so good for the sport, right? Because they were picking sides. And I think you're seeing that in women's cycling now. You're seeing them pick the fans are picking their favorites. And we didn't know enough about the women in that generation in between to know who to cheer for. We just didn't know enough. There wasn't enough coverage. And so it's just a really wonderful time. And I hope they can keep this excitement, and keep it going and keep it safe, because that's the other side of the sport too. Because there is such a gap between, I think you have 200 women fields now, and maybe 100 of them have enough experience to actually be there. And the other 100 are getting it day by day. They're in the school of hard knocks. And I don't fault them. There's just no pipeline to develop. And so they just get thrown in there. And a lot of them are going to do really well. And we're going to get a lot of women from other sports coming in too, I think, that already have the training. That's why I was so good in cycling. I came from all the training I had for speed skating. I came in with a really high level of fitness. I knew how to train. And I think we'll get women from other sports. Like I've always said, rowers, cross-country skiers, speed skaters. There's a lot of us out there who, train hard in other sports that can then move into cycling and do quite well.
We talked about Kasia and that the sport is dangerous. Now you in Girona, we believe. Have you seen your daughter-in-law? Are you allowed to give us a little update on her conditions? Because she had this terrible, horrible, tough crash in Strade Bianchi. Is she recovering okay? Or you go, nah, it's her business. I don't want to talk about it.
Well, when it's only a couple of days after a hard crash, you don't really know how you're doing, I don't think. I think it takes some days to know. Mm-hmm. She's not in Girona right now. They're still in Italy because they were planning to go from Tuscany to Binda. And that decision will be made probably at the last minute, whether or not she does that. But I think it is really hard to know how hard. She's been, knock on wood. She hasn't had this. Yeah, right. This was a heavy crash, and I don't know. I actually can't help you because I don't know. I know it was a heavy crash, and I know she's tough and stubborn. That's not always the best, the best way to be when you're trying to recover, right? And it's very early season, so I have no doubt that she'll recover long term. But I think it's the short term question. And this is the time of season. She loves this time of year. She loves getting after it. She really wants to do Milan San Remo. It's the first time for the women. Well, it's not Milan, it's Genoa San Remo. But I think So I can't help. I don't know, but I do know that she. I do know the one thing I know is when to back off. And a lot of people are giving me advice to give her. And I'm like, you know what, guys? You can't. This is up to her. So, yeah. And Taylor's with her. So I think that's the most important is she has that support.
Well, let's talk about Mr. Taylor Phinney, one of my favorite people on the planet. I think I met Taylor at my dad's race in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, when he was just a bump in your tummy, and then got to know him, got to work with him. But, he definitely had some ups and downs. But what is it like to be a parent of a cyclist where you're watching on TV with bated breath around every corner? My kids didn't race. Yen's kids didn't race. So I would love to hear your perspective of, your daughter-in-law is racing now, but your son was racing for many, many years, which had to have been stressful. Or what was it like?
Well, I'm reliving this a little bit through Didi and Michael Berry right now with their son Ashland, who's coming up. I went to the World Championships in Switzerland and got there in time to see Ashland's road race, and watched it with Didi, and could just feel the stress pouring off of her, And I was like, wow, that's the way I used to be. You're just so all you want. You want them to be happy, which means they need to get a good result, but actually you really just want them to be safe. And I think with Taylor in the early years, I would never have predicted that he would go as far as he went. He was always athletic as a kid, but he really loved soccer and football, that seemed to be the right choice. But then we lived in Italy and he realized he was pretty average and, in the scheme of things as far as that went. And when he tried cycling, he was good right away. And I was happy he found something, because I think every child with a sport is, the sport nourishes you in ways that, not every kid wants that, but with some, it was good for him. He had some great teammates that are, I think, his lifelong friends too, from those early days, like Ben King and Danny Summerhill and some of these guys. But they went through a lot together. But as he became a professional, then the stakes were so high and the expectations were way too high. When they first came to lure him to turn pro, he won the world championships twice, 18 and 19 years old, I think, or 19 and 20 maybe, in the pursuit. That's a 4-minute event. And they're saying, we think you can win the Tour de France. And I'm like, that is a huge leap, And also he grew another 3 inches, so this is my other thing for these guys between 18 and 22. I mean, Taylor grew 3 inches in that time period. He went from 6'2" to 6'5", and 6'5" is really tall for a pro cyclist. Not only that you have a higher center of gravity, but you're also, going to weigh more, and that's going to really complicate your desire to win the Tour de France. So I think that, I thought straight up that they put way too many expectations on him, and that, and there wasn't enough support for the young guys. And you're saying now maybe the support is there. The teams have learned their lesson. They learned how to support these guys. But, in Taylor's day, more guys turned pro and then went home than stayed and kept going at that age. They're just, it was just too hard. And you crash a few times and it gets harder and harder, right? And people write you off, and it's hard to find your way back in. And Bobby, because you coached him for a few years, he was just different. He had a different approach. But I remember you and I following him in the car for this last training before the 2015. What year was it? 2013? What year was it?
The Worlds in Italy there? I think that was 2015. Yeah,
the Worlds in Italy. Yeah, and we followed him in the car. And he was just beautiful. It was just so beautiful. I felt like I was watching a hawk in flight, just, it was so effortless. And he was just flying, and he's like a metronome, right? And just, there was such perfection in that. And that, to me, that's the beauty of sport. It's just that when everything comes together, and it didn't come together on the day, because he made mistakes. He didn't drink water. He didn't look after himself properly. But at the same time, I saw him at the finish line lying on the ground with his hands covering his face, just so disappointed. And that just breaks my heart. So what was it like? It was terrifying. And it was all the emotions. It was all the feels, and I stopped racing in 1984 and then endured watching his dad race for another 8 years as a pro, with a lot of accidents, as well. And you remember the good stuff, but man, you really remember the bad stuff. And I was in Chattanooga when he fell and broke his leg, and it was just one of the single scariest days of my life. I don't want to relive that.
But I don't want to rub it into you, but with people like Taylor and Kasia, it is very likely that once they have children, they might have a certain talent for cycling. So there's a cycling dynasty growing. And even if you become a grandma, I mean, honestly, realistically, it is very likely that the children with the family history like that, at least the grandchildren of you gonna try cycling. Are you ready for that? Are you gonna embrace that?
I won't have a choice, will I, Jens? I will be just like, I will be stuck in my own terrors. But I think, and also very proud, because that's the thing. There's that mix of extreme pride and fear, that it's overwhelming. I can't tell you how stressful it was for me personally watching Kasia. I know personally as well how much she wanted it, I could feel it, and you could see it on the TV, right? And you don't want that. Yeah, I didn't want to see her disappointed. So, and it's all you can do to not just be screaming at the TV while you're watching, but maybe I was screaming. But nobody was there.
We were all screaming. We were all screaming.
Yeah.
But I got to take an opportunity to ask you two just really short maybe funny questions. Let's change the vibe here a little bit. What was the fuel in your pockets or in your musette bag when you were racing?
Well, remember, we didn't race very long. There were really no sports drinks apart from Gatorade, which I never drank during a race. But it was flat Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah, it had to be flat or else the top of the bottle
bubbles
would blow
right
up.
out.
Yeah.
Yep, bubbles all over your legs.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, flat Coca-Cola. Preferably cold, but when it gets warm, what are you going to do? Tastes like syrup, but it's got sugar and caffeine, so it's not that different from a lot of drinks today. And maybe a few grapes in my pocket, but I never really ate much in a race because our races were never really longer than 2 hours was, I think my Olympic race was 2 hours and 11 minutes. If I was in a men's race, I guess I would have to bring something a little bit more, but there were no packaged anything, so you had to make a sandwich or something.
A sandwich, yeah. Okay, second
for lunch.
Second part that I with your legendary history in the sport, you and Davis and Taylor have continued to ride bicycles. What is your favorite innovation in cycling since you retired? And, obviously we've had this boom of innovation. What is the coolest thing?
Yeah, awesome. I love you. Awesome. I did not see it coming, but awesome.
Okay. Here's the thing with an e-bike. I mean, I'm 68 years old. When I ride in eco mode, I feel like I'm 50. When I ride in sport mode, I feel like I'm 40. When I ride in turbo, yeah, I'm ready to race.
Yeah, one of the best presents for my wife, I bought an e-bike some years ago, and it actually did deepen our love. We can go out together. She's not suffering. She can keep up with me, and we both finish our ride perfectly happy. It is absolutely fantastic, e-bikes. Yes.
Listen, when Davis started, so with Davis has Parkinson's disease. He was diagnosed when he was 40. And for a long time, he could still ride a regular road bike. But then after about 10 years, because the Parkinson's really affects one side more than the other, he was starting to really ride, like he'd really collapse on one side. And it was really bad for him, his musculature. He was going to get really injured. And that was right around the time, that e-bikes were starting to come up. And so when he got his first e-bike, and I was trying to keep up with him on a regular bike, I'm like, what am I doing? And you can ride most of the time. We're riding on eco mode, but we're riding on really nice, drop handlebars. Here in Girona, we ride on very wide tires, gravel for the gravel roads, and we hardly ride on the roads if we can avoid it. The gravel riding is phenomenal, but we can also just start out and go really uphill if we need to avoid traffic or to get on a trail we want to get on. I mean, not damaging yourself because you can put it on turbo. So we both started doing it pretty much together straight away. And we have people still say to us, like, and they don't know who we are even. They'll see us riding like, oh, you're cheating. Who are we cheating?
No.
I hate that attitude. And the more people that can get out, like if your wife can ride with you, that's phenomenal, right? And I've heard that from a lot of couples. And I think it's just kind of the wave of the future in terms of, enjoyment. And especially as you get older, and it's better for your knees and your back and everything else. And it just lets you ride more, enjoy it more.
So how often do you actually have a chance to ride bikes? You have the Davis Phinney Foundation. You support Taylor and Kasia in the dream of Kasia, maybe hopefully defending her Tour de France title. How much time do you have for yourself, free time? How often do you go out riding the bike? And do you sometimes still get competitive when you're out there?
I don't have a competitive bone in my body anymore, so no.
Awesome, the same for me.
I am not. And if somebody wants to race me, I'm like, go for it. You just beat me. Yay. Yay for you. Davis, however, will still take Kasia on in sprints.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
He does. He loves to sprint. And when Kasia's parents come, we ride with her parents too. Her parents are really fun to ride with and very feisty. Her dad is very feisty. And he likes to sprint too. So actually those guys will take off for, town signs and stuff. But no, I'm not competitive, and I do enjoy riding, and we could ride every day if we wanted to. We don't ride every day. I'd say maybe 4 days a week we try to ride during the, good weather. We're fair weather riders too. We don't really like to ride in the rain unless we get caught in it, and then we're prepared. But but yes, we love to ride. I mean, riding is a big part of our life, and adventure riding is a really big part of our life. And that's one of the things we love about coming to Girona in particular, because there's so many more trails we can ride and gravel roads. And when we ride with Taylor, he pulls up the Strava heat map and he's riding with his phone. Go left, go right. We're on single track and double track. And, I feel like we're going through somebody's yard, and half the time we probably are, but it's all open, to ride. And there's nothing that pleases me more than adventure riding. So, everything else we do in our life is pretty tame compared to that.
Jeez. Connie, we're getting towards the end here, but I have to ask this question. I'm sure you've had to answer this question many, many times before, but with your knowledge, your status, your experience, what would you say to young women out there that are just getting interested in the sport of cycling that we love so much?
Well, I think number one is I would avoid getting a coach that has you riding all the time on your own doing intervals. I would say do group rides, ride with other people. That's what's going to teach you the most. Ride with fast moving groups that you can trust, and try to get in as many races as you can, and I don't really know what's available now for someone getting into it, but do it because you love it. You can't do this sport unless you love it. I've said that once already. I'll say it again. Like, if this is something you really love, you're going to make it work, but you've got to love it. And bike riding is it's a complex relationship, with bike racing. I was going to say it is a tough mistress, but that doesn't work for everybody. It's but it's hard, and advocate for yourself too. I think that's another hard thing when you're first coming up in a sport, is figuring out who can help you move along and at what pace you need to move up, and so you do need to advocate for yourself. And it's not easy. I think it's very hard to get from that starting level up, but it's a beautiful sport.
Do you still have that 84 Olympics bike you used to win the medal? And the medal for sure you still have. Where's the medal? Special place somewhere back home, or just somewhere in a bookshelf?
The medal kind of hides in a box. I bring it out if I speak to school children, and I pass it around the room. Usually I get it back at the end of the day.
That's good. Important point.
And then I like people to be able to touch it, and so it's a bit dinged up by now, but it doesn't hang on a wall. Actually, if you came into our house, you wouldn't see much evidence of. You'd see Taylor's art and my daughter's art, and friends' art, but you don't really see images of us. We live in a pretty small apartment now, though, so that's part of it. The bike is in the Boulder Museum of History, which is really cool. It's part of a permanent exhibition there. And I'm really proud of that because it really honors my history in Boulder, which is really where I got to take off as a cyclist with the bike race that we had there. And so, yeah, so the bike is there, and it does look really archaic by today's bike standards, but it's still there. Yeah.
Well, Connie, this has exceeded all my expectations today, being able to speak with you. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Odd Tandem today. It just makes my heart smile listening to you, hearing you, and just passing the knowledge on to the next generation of women, of cycling fans in general, of e-bike lovers. So thank you so much for coming on the Odd Tandem today, Connie. And please say hello to Davis for us as well.
Davis says hi to you guys, you gents, and I really appreciate being included. And yes, thank you so much. I had fun too. It's nice to time trip a little bit.
Hey, thanks for watching the podcast. If you enjoyed our chat with Connie, why not check out our videos with other icons of women cycling, Kasia Niewiadoma or Kristen Faulkner, by clicking here.
And remember, you can sign up to our Patreon to get an ad-free version of the podcast like these great people.